Xiang Yu, or XY, is one of the most powerful commanders in the Season of Conquest, largely because he has one of the highest DPSs, or damage per seconds, of all of the commanders in the game right now. So how should you build his talents? How should you set him up to maximize the uniqueness of his rage capabilities and his skill damage? Well, in this video, I've done all of the testing and have the final answer for you, so stick around. What's up everybody, Psych out here with another Rise of Kingdoms video. Xiang Yu, or XY, is one of the most popular commanders in the Season of Conquest stage of Rise of Kingdoms. And for good reason. He's a cavalry commander with AoE damage and AoE debuff, and he has a shockingly low rage requirement of only 900, which can be reduced by another 50 by maxing his 4th skill, making his total rage requirement a tiny 850. So yeah, this commander is one who wants to fire big nukes, doing big damage and big debuffs very frequently. But given his unique rage requirements, how should you build his talents? Should you go all in on the talents like Feral Nature? Should you get his rage boosting talents in the skill tree and the cavalry tree like Undying Fury? Should you equip him with a Horn of Fury to gain even more rage? Or is all of this overkill? Well, in this video, I'm going to give you the answer. I compared 4 different talent builds for XY, looking at how quickly he fires his first skill, how fast his skill cycle is when he gets going, and just how much rage gets wasted using different builds. Now, wait a minute. Did you just say 4 talent builds? Yes, I did, but let me back up and tell you how I got to these talent builds. It all started by building a rage simulator. Well, actually, it all started with a John Wick video and his crew making videos about how rage works, so shout out to them. Link to his videos in the description. But after that, I built this, the Rage Simulator. And no, you're not losing your eyesight. I've intentionally blurred the details of the code. I mean, hey, I worked pretty hard on this and I'd like to keep it for myself for just a little bit. In any case, I've built this Rage Simulator that follows all the rules John Wick discovered and adds a whole bunch of features like the ability to change how many points are in Rejuvenate, Rage Talents, Feral Nature, Commander buffs from Sun Tzu, YSG, Trajan, Joan, and others, as well as rage buffs from accessories like the War Drums and a Horn of Fury. And I've tested the simulator against real battle reports and it matches them precisely. Most of this video, this simulator let me simulate 10,000 60-turn or 1-minute battles for more than 80 possible scenarios, including 24 different talent builds with XY, whether you're winning or losing the battle, whether you're facing a silent trial, whether you have the Horn of Fury or not. But walking you through all of those scenarios would be pretty boring, so I'm cutting to the chase here and showing you just the 4 most critical talent builds. So starting first with build number 1, or what I call the minimal rage build. This build includes Burning Blood and Rejuvenate, but otherwise focuses on talents in the cavalry tree and doesn't provide any additional rage. This build says, given XY's low rage requirement, I don't really need any more. Build number 2 moves some points from the cavalry tree to pick up Undying Fury, maximizing the non-random rage that you get. This build says, I like rage, but I don't really like unpredictability. Build number 3 moves even more points out of the cavalry tree to put 2 points into Feral Nature. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why only 2 points? Well, remember all those tests I mentioned I ran before? You're just going to have to trust me on this. Putting any more than 2 points into Feral Nature with XY is largely a waste of talent points. Remember, the goal of adding rage is not to get as much rage as possible, but to increase your chances of firing a skill. If you have 800 rage and gain 200 rage on a turn, 150 of that rage just got wasted because you only needed 50 points to activate the skill. In any case, this build says, I'd like to have a chance to accelerate my rage, but I don't want to give up too many cavalry tree talents. Finally, build number 4, the maximum rage build. It's the same as build number 3, but sacrificing a few points in the cavalry tree to really get maximum rage going. Okay, so which of these builds is the best? Well, the answer to that question depends on 2 other questions. Number 1, are you facing a silent trial or not? And then number 2, do you have the Horn of Fury or not? But let's start with a scenario where both of the answers here are no. So you're not facing a silent trial and you don't have the Horn of Fury. In this scenario, something kind of interesting happens. Build number 1, the minimum rage build, ends up being very good. XY will fire his skill on turn 9, and he will fire every 7 turns after that. Moreover, he never goes over the 220 rage cap per turn and is very efficient with his rage usage. If we compare that to build number 2, we get the exact same results, fire on turn 9 and a 7-turn skill cycle. So the extra rage points in build number 2 are completely wasted. The other interesting thing we see in this scenario is that build number 4, the maximum rage build, increases your chances of firing your first skill 1 turn earlier by about 50%. So if you really want to be the first to fire, you might consider build number 4 in this scenario. But what happens when we are facing a silent trial? Well, those extra rage points in build number 2 really shine. While build number 1 now fires first on turn 10 and has an 8-second skill cycle, build number 2 still fires on turn number 9 and still has a 7-second skill cycle. So build number 2 completely negates the effect of silent trial. Builds 3 and 4 don't really offer much extra beyond build number 2. So if your opponent doesn't have a silent trial, build number 2 is kind of a waste, but if they do, it completely counters it. Okay, now let's see what happens if we equip XY with a Horn of Fury. In this scenario, builds 2 and 4 really stand out, with build number 4 looking very impressive. The first skill will fire on turn 7 or 8 on a high percentage of the time with these 2 builds, and they have skill cycle lengths of around 6 seconds, which is pretty rapid fire skills. Build number 4 wastes a little bit more rage than build number 2, but it fires about 0.7 or a little under 1 more skill per minute than build number 2. And finally, to our last scenario when we have Horn of Fury and we are facing silent trial. In this scenario, both builds 2 and 4 again stand out as very solid. Both tend to be efficient with rage, that is, not wasting much rage, and have similar first skill fire timings and cycle lengths. Okay, one last thing I should mention, I also ran these tests for scenarios in which XY is losing the fight, getting more base rage, and the conclusions here still held up pretty well, though there's a little bit more wasted rage in some scenarios. However, I suspect that most players don't go into a fight hoping that they lose. So what can we conclude from all of this? Well, a few things. First, putting 5 points into Feral Nature seems to be very inefficient, at least with XY. Sure, that will generate more rage, but a lot of that ends up getting wasted, especially when you consider the fact that none of these tests included potential buffs from William, Trajan, or even the nearby war drums. Second, if you really want to make sure that your XY fires first, you should consider build number 4. One thing to note about this build is that if you like to target archers, you should also consider moving the points from Emblazoned Shield near the top of the cavalry tree to Halberd, which will do a bit more damage to archers. In field testing against archers, I found this to make a big difference. But if you want a build that is a bit more predictable, but still very powerful and very efficient with rage, I strongly recommend build number 2, and that is the build that I'll be using. And that's it for this video, everyone. I hope you learned something useful, and if you did, please do me a favor and click that like button. I'm not a professional YouTuber, I'm sure you could tell, but liking my videos tells me that you want to know more about these topics. If you have questions or comments, leave them down below, as I will respond to all of them. And finally, I have more results from these rage simulators, including those with Xiang Yu, coming on this channel. So be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification so that you don't miss it. See you all next time.